The tonfa typically is used in pairs, and there are a lot of traditional katas that we could look at that are perfectly valuable, but what I feel is most important is understanding how to manipulate and move it. So the very first thing I would recommend if you're using them is to play with them single-handedly. Start off with your hand of preference, then work your support hand just to get comfortable manipulating it. The short handle, the side handle, when gripping it, one of the first advantages of the tonfa is the way it's going to work our grip different from a sword. We know that with a sword or a stick, our primary emphasis in our grip is placed on those bottom two fingers, which are counterbalancing the fulcrum of our thumb web. But when we deal with the tonfa side handle, the difference is our priority sometimes can be on the bottom. If I am upward blocking with it to keep it aligned across the forearm, but sometimes I'm going to shift and place priority on the top fingers in order to facilitate spinning. And so it has this very interesting undulation between bottom two and top two. Moreover, if I use something like a sword, when I am contracting those bottom two, let's say in a sword grip, and I'm chopping, very often my two hands are interplaying, where it's not just both going forward, but one is pulling back as if I'm casting a fishing rod. That energy is very hard to feel sometimes with one hand. It's hard to build unless you have a very heavy sword. But with a tonfa, when we look at blocking, we want to make sure that this is very tightly pressed against our forearm. Otherwise, when incoming force comes in, it's going to really smack against the bone of the ulna or the elbow. So this forward gripping action, where my hand is fundamentally curling like this, really does a lot to build that same grip strength that I'm going to need not only for a straight stick and sword, but also for punching in general. So for overall forearm strength, combined with variable grip and flexibility and looseness, there's nothing quite like a tonfa. So some basic gripping exercises. When we grip it, we'd like to get something that has a handle that's a good fit for our hand. You'll see sometimes, like with something like a PR24, it was a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, and very often there's a big gap. And so smaller-handed people might find themselves all the way up here, and then there's a lot of resetting to jam it down, using the body after we do any kind of rotational work. It's also much heavier, and it's always used single-handedly. It's never used in pairs. In fact, the PR24 has an entire body of work where we go two-handed to do power chops and hits. And if you're interested in that, you can check out my download on extendable baton. I have a whole section on the unique uses of the PR24. But when we speak about something like a tonfa, while there are some similarities, there's an entire world of movement that would be considered egregiously illegal for law enforcement. So, very first gripping exercise we're going to look at. I'm going to lift up my sleeve so you can see. When gripping the short handle, I want to see that I can press it tightly into the meat of my forearm. Everybody has preferences. Some people like it square on the bone, like that. Some people like it a little bit more on the inside. Even if it's on the inside, you'll see it's more than strong enough to stop your bone from getting impacted. It's still protruding extensively. If I put it slightly more on the bone or slightly more inside, you're still offering that wooden edge as your primary blocking edge. So that's my very first motion. Can I align it on my arm? One of the first gripping exercises we would play with is we would align it, and then we would bring it into what's called a tuck, which is inside the body, meaning it can go tucked under my elbow, right? And also because the tonfa is shorter than the PR24, it can usually clear my body on the inside here. I have room for it to clear. So framing for blocks on the forearm, and then bringing it in and tucking it so it can go under my arm. One position we never use combatively but can be good for strengthening and flexibility is to also practice bringing it outside, trying to see if I can get it outside of my arm. And if I swing it a little bit and loosen it, I can exaggerate this. I'm never going to have it outside of here combatively. I'm never going to block with it here because it's going to jam down into my radius. But as a movement exercise, it teaches me also how to recover from misalignment, which can happen. I can go up with a well-intended block and the motion pushes it off because it comes in from an angle I wasn't expecting, or my grip's just not strong enough. So alignment from the frame to the tuck, or my primary. Alignment, tuck, but I can also play with misalignment to the outside. And you can jump from inside to outside. So these will get your forearm burning very quickly. Super simple exercise. I like to work at both hands just to see that you have that ability. You can play as well with cradling, bringing it up on the inside. Some forms I've seen in Indonesia have that kind of, upward movement, like in silat for backward hits. That's fine. but from a block to a tuck to an outside to a cradle, just to see I have that comfort. The main two again are going to be block and tuck. Now, once that motion gets comfortable, see that you're able to deliver a basic punch. Classically, you know, we'd have some kind of a high horse stance. Some people teach it fully open to the side. Some people have it more vertical. We often had it more at an angle. And I can see that I can generate my punch and I can hit. And the whole key here is that I maintain solidity so that when I'm hitting with the tip, it's not bouncing all over my forearm. And again, what a great little weightlifting exercise to make your punches stronger and your alignment strong. I also want to be careful about coming back and spiking myself in the body. So these are coming off to the side. So as a mapping exercise, learning how to pull that back without losing control. If I lose control, the consequences, I get it in the rib. And that'll really teach you very quickly how to keep good alignment. So again, we would usually start off with a single punch, switching every time. If that became comfortable, double punching, changing heights, right? I often, even though it's a classical weapon, will train it more in a boxing stance, right? Working, because I should be able to use this in all the same ways to amplify the technique that I use today, which is more boxing. I'm not fighting in this position anymore. The second strike to look at is the rotation. So the rotational strike requires us now to switch grip. I'm going again to a top pinch with those top two fingers, and I'm looking to open. If I'm single-handed, it's a bit easier to learn because I can just raise it up and I can go into the chamber of my body. Certainly with something like a PR24, that's how we learn to use it. We have one hand always, so I'm using not just the void, but the rotation of my body to help me absorb and launch it back. So in exactly the same way, I can take a classical tonfa, I can lift, and I can bring it over. And even though it's wood, this is not, end of the world. I'm not hitting myself. I am slowing it down to some extent by squeezing the break of my hand, but I'm also absorbing a good amount by the rotation. If that gets comfortable, I can look at couching my elbow in. I don't want my elbow out because if I'm chambered, if I have two of these, I may not always have the ability to take the other one up. Very often I'm going to be tight. And so if I bring it over, I want to make sure that I'm tapping on the meat of my arm and not hitting myself on the point of the elbow. So I want to see that I can go out and back, out and back. And again, guys, when that comes over, there's always a lot of interplay with the fingers. Releasing and tightening, releasing and tightening. Release to open, and then tightening as it gets close to my body. There's value in practicing putting on the brakes straight, because there will be times when I'm going to switch to an elongated grip. But the basic rotation, raising, right, raising, or couching, which is the one I prefer most because it allows me to stay tight. Blocking, boom, keeping it tight wherever I want to be. I can hit the weapon, I can hit the arm, I can raise, right? I can have the arm low as in a shielded position. I think of it like terms of boxing. It should be that practical for me. I notch. The other thing to be careful of, like with any weapon, I'm always indexing with my wrist on my head, never with the thumb coming in. So a lot of times in Western boxing, we get used to couching the glove on our face, but if I start doing that with a tonfa, it can be very dangerous, and I don't want to unicorn myself in the head either. So it's on the outside of the head, and it's above if I'm shielding. Up, up, tight, tight, like that. Just like I don't want to shield with this near my head, I want to shield with that high, just like I would with barehanded boxing. I also don't want to parry with this on my lips and get hit. I always want that short handle to clear the beard. Right? So this really teaches me to have good alignment. A lot of people parry here like they're sniffing their fingers and they guide the shot into their lips. So the tonfa, it's painfully apparent even if you're alone. I want to slip, slip, and I can do it either as a ramp or a little rotating knock, bam, onto the hand as it comes in. So slip with all the speed of slip. I can likewise pop up and sometimes even hook here, pop at the tip. But generally I'm working here. Slip, slip. There's your Philly shell with tonfas. Slip, boom, and there's your hook. From here, instead of it being a hand, you have full extension. So it just translates beautifully, right? just beautifully to Western boxing.